Well, here we are again. Hopefully tonight we'll maybe be able to finish out Daniel. I'm going to get right into it and see what we can come up with. See if we can understand all this stuff. It's kind of difficult. If you remember, when we cut off, we were just getting started into chapter 11. Now, chapter 11 is just a continuation, actually, of chapter 10, because remember, chapter 10, 11, and 12, the last three chapters, all are talking about this last vision that Daniel has. And this last vision is telling us things that we know has already occurred, and I'm going to show you how it corresponds to history here. But we know that it's already occurred, but in Daniel's time it had not yet been. So it was prophecy to Daniel. It's history to us, except for the last part of it. And when we get to the last part, we'll see that part is strictly pertains to the latter days of the tribulation. So let's start with chapter 11. Let me go back up to verse 1. Also, in the first year of Darius the Mede, even I stood up to confirm and strengthen him. Now this is the angel speaking. The angel says that he stood up to strengthen Darius the Mede, because Darius the Mede had become a believer, believing in God Himself. Remember, he threw Daniel into the lion's den, and when Daniel came out, he published a decree there that everyone had to worship Daniel's God. Okay. Verse 2, and now I will tell you the truth. The angel says, now I'll tell you the truth. Behold, 3 more kings will arise in Persia, and the 4th shall be far richer than them all. By his strength, through his riches, he shall stir up against the realm of Greece. Okay, so beginning actually here through verse 34 is one of the most amazing examples of predictive history that you've ever seen. Much of this has already been fulfilled, as I said, but some of it is still yet to come. Now, Daniel won't live to see the fulfillment of all this, but the angel gave him the message anyway to record, to give comfort to God's people, who's going to live during these fearful days that he's talking about or going to be talking about. Now the history comes in. It said that it says, now we'll tell you the truth. Behold, 3 more kings will arise in Persia, and the 4th shall be far richer than them all. By his strength through his riches, he shall stir up all against the realm of Greece. Now, this was fulfilled. It was fulfilled back in 530 BC, when 3 more kings followed Cyrus. That was Cambris, Pseudo-Simnius, and Darius, the 3 kings that followed him. And then the 4th king that would follow, it talked about here, that's going to be richer and stronger, referred to Xerxes. He was the king. He was the king from 486 to 465 BC, and he invaded Greece in 480 BC and was surprisingly defeated by an alliance of Greek city-states. So it's pretty much just what it's saying here. In verse 3 it said, then the mighty king shall arise, who shall rule with great dominion and do according to his will. And when he has arisen, his kingdom shall be broken up and divided toward the 4 winds of heaven, but not among his prosperity, nor according to his dominion, with which he ruled, for his kingdom shall be uprooted, even for others besides these. Okay, now the dimension of Greece at the end of verse 2, it said the realm of Greece, so it shall stir up against the realm of Greece. Now where it mentions Greece at the end of verse 2, the angel then zooms in on Alexander the Great, because that's what when we're talking, who he's talking about here is Alexander Great. The mighty king shall arise and who shall rule with great dominion and do according to his will. Now that was Alexander the Great, who came through, swept through, and took over. The description of verse 3 and 4 fits exactly with what we've seen earlier in our study about this powerful and sometimes reckless monarch, Alexander the Great. So you see, he was part of the fulfillment of this. Now, verse 5, this is where we left off the other night. Verse 5 says, also the king of the south shall become strong, as well as one of the princes, and he shall gain power over him and have dominion, and his dominion shall be a great dominion. Now this version here talking about the king of the south, and it talks about the king of the south, and then later it'll talk about the king of the north. Throughout this chapter, these titles flow from one person to another. In verse 5, the king of the south is Ptolemy. And Alexander, who was one of Alexander's proteges, and when he took control of Egypt, he called him the king of the south. The man identified as one of his commanders, Seleucus Nectar, a member of the quartet, who ruled Syria, and who quickly becomes the king of the north. So you see, it's all being fulfilled. It's all coming out here. So Daniel in verse 6. Verse 6. And at the end of some years they shall join forces, for the daughter of the king of the south shall go to the king of the north and make an agreement, but she shall not retain the power of her authority, and neither he nor his authority shall stand, but she shall be given up with those who brought her, and with him who begot her, and with him who strengthened her in these times. Okay, now the daughter mentioned here is Bernice. Bernice was the granddaughter of Soter and the daughter of Philadelphus, part of the Ptolemy regime. Now, royal politicians here plan for her to marry Antiochus Theos, a grandson of Nictor. And in order to make this possible, Antiochus had to divorce his first wife, Laodicea. Now, an interesting name, that was an interesting name in view of the early chapters of Revelation where it talked about the church of Laodicea. That's one of the 7 churches. Been there many times. Love the area, going to visit those churches. But an interesting name. It's an interesting name considering it, the Revelation has to say about it. Now the idea fell apart though. It didn't work. It fell apart. So within 2 years of the marriage, Ptolemy died, and Antiochus remarried Laodicea. Now, the true Greek is in true Greek soap opera style. Laodicea retaliated by murdering Antiochus and Bernice and their infant son. So it says in verse 6, she shall be given up with those who brought her, and with him who begot her, and with him who strengthened her in those times. Boy, reading this is just like reading a history book. Same thing. So then the king of the north. Well, let's look at verse 7 first. But from a branch of her roots, in his place, who shall come with an army, enter the fortress of the king of the north, and deal with him, and prevail. Verse 8. And he shall also carry their gods captive to Egypt, and with their princes and their precious articles of silver and gold, he shall continue more years than the king of the north. Also the king of the north shall come to the kingdom of the king of the south, but shall return to his own land. However, his sons shall stir up strife and assemble a multitude of great forces, and one shall certainly come and overwhelm and pass through, then shall return to his fortress and stir up strife. So what we're talking about here, most likely the branch, where it talks about the branch of her roots, over in here in verse 7. But from the branch of her roots one shall arise. We're talking about Bernice's brother, Ptolemy Euergetus, who attacked Cilicius Calenus and carried home the spoils of all of Egypt, the war. The king then of the north will invade, and the realm of the king of the south will and a retaliation will was attacked by Callinicus in 240 BC, and that failed miserably. Now verse 10 here talks about the sun stirring up strife. It introduces a new wrinkle, because here the sons of Callinicus and Seleucus Cernius in 227-223 BC, and Antiochus the Great 223 to 187 BC. Collectively, they gathered enormous forces and charged south to wipe out the Egyptians. They were after them. Now, remember, all of this was taking place in the area of Palestine, because they were running back and forth over that country and tearing it up. Cyrenius, however, was killed in Asia Minor before the invasion. So Antiochus the Great overran Phoenicia and Palestine until he came up against the Egyptians in the Battle of Raphia, and he was thrashed by Ptolemy the Fourth in about 218 BC. War after war after war. Now, these historical portions of Daniel are not given merely to review past events, but to trace the workings of God in the world in Daniel's time all the way to the end time. Okay, let's look at verse 11. And the king of the south shall be moved with rage, and go out and fight with him, with the king of the north, and shall muster a great multitude, but the multitude shall be given into the hand of his enemy. When he has taken away the multitude, his heart will be lifted up, and he will be cast down tens of thousands, but he will not prevail. Verse 13. For the king of the north will return and muster a multitude greater than the former, and shall certainly come at the end of some years with a great army and much equipment. Okay. Now Ptolemy Philopator had marched out to meet Antiochus the Great. They were getting ready for war. For the next 14 years, Antiochus busied himself with nailing down all the nations in the eastern Mediterranean area. All of them in the eastern Mediterranean, he took over. And that extending his borders as far as India to the north and as far as the Caspian Sea. Then in 203 BC, Ptolemy Philopator and his queen died. Antiochus, sensing another opportunity, he headed south with a huge army, fully equipped. All he wanted to do was get more and more land, more and more countries, more and more nations. Now, verse 14. Now, in those times, many shall rise up against the king of the south. In those times, many is going to rise up against the king of the south. Also, violent men of your people shall exalt themselves in fulfillment of the vision, but they shall fall. So the apostate Jews, the Jews that who were thrown out during the time that they were separated, and that they're Jews. They're not really belong to anything. that the apostate Jews had joined the Syrians in their attack against Egypt. So the Jews joined with the Syrians in attack when they attacked Egypt. But you ought to note that all these battles were fought not on Egyptian soils, but also in northern Palestine. So you can understand why the Jews would join with them in fact. But in fulfillment of the vision, here in 14, the first involvement of the Jews with the Syrian forces lay the early groundwork for the rise of Antiochus Epiphanes. So they were giving him an opportunity. Remember Antiochus Epiphanes. You remember who he is and what he caused. Okay. Verse 15. So the king of the north shall come and build a siege mound and take a fortified city, and the forces of the south shall not withstand him. Even his choice troops shall have no strength to resist. But he who comes against him shall do according to his own will, and no one shall stand against him. He shall stand in the glorious land, and destruction in its powers. Remember the glorious land? That's Israel. Okay? Now the fortified city that it's talking about here in verse 15 was most likely Sidon on the Mediterranean Sea. Egypt itself was not yet in danger, but the Syrians, having taken control of the east and the north, moved south with great power, and they besieged the glorious land, or Israel. They took over Israel. In verse 17, he shall also set his face to enter with the strength of his whole kingdom, and the upright ones with him. Thus shall he do. And he shall give him the daughter of women and he shall give him the daughter of women to destroy it. And he shall give him the daughter of woman to destroy it, but she shall not stand with him or be for him. Okay. Now this is talking about Antiochus again. Antiochus assessed that he might control Egypt politically without even having to continue on to march south. So he made an alliance with the king of the south, the king of Egypt. He offered his daughter to the 10-year-old Ptolemy V in hopes that she'd control her husband and they'd be able to advance the pro-Syrian agenda in Egypt. But it didn't work. It didn't work. Verse 18, after this, he shall turn his face to the coastlands, and shall take many. But a ruler shall bring the reproach against them to an end, and with the reproach removed, he shall turn back on him. Then he shall turn his face towards the fortress of his own land, but he shall stumble and fall and not be found. Okay. Now, Antiochus turned his face to the coastlands. That's where he was headed. He wanted to take over the coastlands. It means he decided to emulate Alexander the Great by conquering and controlling Greece. But he didn't count on the Greeks appealing to Rome for help. See, Rome has to get in there somewhere. In the time Antiochus found himself, and this time he found himself battling the Greeks, the Romans, and the Macedonians all together. And at Thermopylae, the Confederacy smashed a Syrian command post, and Antiochus went back to Asia Minor, where he belonged. As he retreated, the Romans followed him, and with a force of 30,000 defeated Antiochus 70,000 somewhere west of Sardis. And Antiochus lost all claim to Europe and most of Asia Minor. He agreed to stay east of Tarsus, the east of the Tarsus range. To guarantee to compliance, 20 hostages were taken to Rome. To guarantee that he complied with this, 20 hostages were taken to Rome, and that included the second son of Antiochus. That's going to be the one who will become Antiochus Epiphanes, and thereby connected us to the next section of this chapter. Okay, now the next section of this chapter, starting in verse 20, says, "There shall arise in his place one who imposes taxes on the glorious kingdom, but within a few days he shall be destroyed, but not in anger or in battle." So the successor of this verse is Seleucus Philippi, 187 to 176 BC. Now, he faced enormous national debt after the wars that his father had conducted. And so he owed the Romans some 20,000 talents. So he planned to plunder Israel. And his tax collector, Herodotus, intended to invade the temple of Yahweh. Going to go into the temple, the glorious temple of God. But according to Second Maccabees, which, remember I told you that was the intertestamental books that did not make it into the Bible, but they're really good for history. According to that, to Second Maccabees 3:7 through 40, this Herodias, who was going to go into Yahweh's temple and plunder it and take all the stuff out of it, was stopped by a vision of angels assaulting him. That vision, I don't know much about that because it was just in the Maccabees, but he was stopped by a vision of angels. Instead of finishing his mission, then he turned around and returned to his homeland to assassinate Seleucus Philippi. Didn't learn, did he? Okay, verse 21. "And in his place shall arise a vile person." See, excuse me. They just keep arising, a different person in the place of the other, just according to the Bible. We see it's actually happening in history. "And his place shall arise a vile person." Most of those were vile, it sounded like. But in his place he shall arise a vile person to whom they will not give the honor of royalty. But he shall come in peaceably and seize the kingdom by intrigue. Excuse me. Now the rightful heir to the throne of Seleucus IV was a young son, Demetrius I. But he was still a hostage in Rome. So Uncle Antiochus took over and through political intrigue gained control as king of the north. Just what the Bible says. Verse 22. "With the force of a flood they shall be swept away from before him and be broken, and also the prince of the covenant. And after the league is made with him, he shall act deceitfully, for he shall come up and become strong with a small number of people. And he shall enter peaceably even into the richest places of the province, and he shall do what his fathers have not done, nor his forefathers. He shall disperse among them the plunder, spoil, and riches, and he shall devise his plans against the strongholds, but only for a time." So he's going to become like a Robin Hood, take away from the rich and give to the poor, or in his case, to take away from one rich and give to another rich. Okay. In 181 BC, Ptolemy VII, who had taken the throne at the age of 6 under control of his mother Cleopatra. Now, this is not the Cleopatra. This is a one that came before the Cleopatra, but there are several Cleopatras. And she still ran the kingdom, even though he was the king, because he was only 6 years old. Sometime later, though, he moved to Palestine, and but at that time he had a huge army, and he was defeated by Antiochus Epiphanes, who destroyed, and in the process, the Prince of the Covenant. Most commentators or scholars of the Bible believe that this refers to the Jewish high priest Oranus, that he destroyed him, or he had him assassinated. Okay, verse 25. He shall stir up his power and his courage against the king of the south with a great army, and the king of the south shall be stirred up to battle with a very great and mighty army, but he shall not stand, for they shall devise plans against him. Yes, those who eat of the portion of his delicacies shall destroy him. His army shall be swept away, and many shall fall down slain. Verse 27, both these kings' hearts shall be bent on evil, and they shall speak lies at the same table. But it shall not prosper, for the end will still be at the appointed time. Now these verses describe the final major conflict of Antiochus Epiphanes against the Egyptians, and this took place just east of the Nile River Delta. Now clearly, the little horn, remember the little horn came up out of the sea, and the little horn that was growing, and then who was that little horn? That little horn was Antiochus Epiphanes. So clearly the little horn, excuse me, frog jumped around my throat. Clearly, the little horn had marched the full length of Palestine right to the border of Egypt. Now Ptolemy was betrayed by his own people, and Daniel predicted this phony truce when he said, both these kings' hearts shall be bent on evil, and they shall speak lies at the same table. So he prophesied that. After this, Antiochus headed back to Syria, but on his way he squashed a mini rebellion in Jerusalem. And so then he plundered the temple in the process of squashing the rebellion. And in verse 28, this offers the first indication of this chapter of Antiochus' hostilities against the Jews. Look at verse 28 again. While returning to his land with greater riches, his heart shall be moved against the holy covenant, so he shall do damage and return to his own land. So exactly what happened is exactly what it says here. Reading the history book. Verse 29. At the appointed time he shall return and go toward the south, but it shall not be like the former or the latter. For ships from Cyprus shall come against him, and therefore he shall be grieved and return in rage against the holy covenant and do damage. So he shall return and show regard for those who forsake the holy covenant. Now this is an interesting thing that happened here. In 168 BC, Antiochus again headed south to face a new coalition government of Egypt. He was going to go back in and take over Egypt. He just thought it was time for him to do it. But as the scripture indicates, this time the outcome is going to be different, because the Romans again involve themselves. The Romans come in again. Remember, and in the end time, it's going to be somebody from those Romans that's going to be the Antichrist. The Romans involved themselves this time on the side of the Egyptians. Antiochus approached the city of Alexandria, he was going to go in there and level it. He was handed a letter, just as he was getting ready to go in there, he was handed a letter from the Roman Senate telling him to cease and desist. So once again, on his way home from Egypt, he plowed through Palestine and took out his aggression on these Jews down there. Poor Jews. Verse 31, and forces shall be mustered by him, and they shall defile the sanctuary fortress. Then they shall take away the daily sacrifices, and place there the abomination of desolation. Those who do wickedly against the covenant he shall corrupt with flattery, but the people who know their God shall be strong and carry out grief carry out great exploits. Okay. And we can't leave this section here without recognizing this phrase, the people who know their God shall be strong and carry out great exploits. Now we've already studied or seen in the Maccabees what they're talking about here. Verse 33, and those of the people who understand shall instruct many. Yet for many days they shall fall by the sword and flame, by captivity and plundering. He's talking about those that know about Christianity at the end time, or the Jewish laws here, will teach it to many, but yet they're going to end up falling by the sword. Verse 34, now when they fall, they shall be aided with a little help, but many shall join with them by intrigue. And some of those, verse 35, and some of those of understanding shall fall to refine them, purify them, and make them white until the time of the end, because it is still for the appropriate time. Now, the spiritual leaders, what it says here is the spiritual leaders will instruct many, and their resistance will be accompanied by the martyrdom, because they're going to teach more, but many, and they're going to fall by the sword. They're going to be martyred, and who will fall by the sword will be burned or captured or plundered. Now, the little help is talking about here may refer to some of the early victories of the Maccabees. Remember, the Maccabees were the clan that came in and ran the Antiochus out of Israel. But so the little help might refer to early victories of the Maccabees under Matthias and his son Judas Maccabeus. They led a rededication. They led to the rededication of the temple and the altar in 165 BC. So they came back in, they ran them out, they rebuilt the temple, rededicated the altar. An amazing summary of history which describes 135 prophecies already fulfilled. Now this unveils a gateway to the future and ultimate fulfillment of the little horn in the Antichrist. Verse 36, we're getting there. Then the king shall do according to his own will. He shall exalt and magnify himself above every god, shall speak blasphemies against the God of gods, and shall prosper till the wrath has been accomplished for what has been determined shall be done. Now the Jews believed that this passage referred to the Antichrist. He shall regard neither, verse 37, he shall regard neither the God of his fathers, nor the desire of women, nor regard any God, for he shall exalt himself above them all. But in their place he shall honor a God of fortresses, and a God which his father did not know. He shall honor with gold and silver, with precious stones and pleasant things. Thus he shall act against the strongest fortress with a foreign god, which he shall acknowledge, and advance its glory. And he shall cause them to rule over many, and divide the land for gain. Okay. Now this willful king is going to make war. He's going to make war with his gods. That's what it's talking about. He will honor the God of fortress. He's worshiping the God of war. He wants to fight. He worships people who have worships the God who will provide him with the army or military is what it's really saying here. In verse 40, and also we need to realize too what else he's talking about here. He shall honor God a fortress and a God which his fathers did not know. He shall honor the gold and silver and precious stones and pleasant things. So he's going to worship. He's going to want all the riches that he can get, and he's going to worship those riches. And he's going to act against the strongest fortress with a foreign god, which he shall acknowledge and advance its glory. And he shall cause them to rule over many, and he's going to divide the gain. So it's right down the line is what they have predicted about the Antichrist. Verse 40 says, at the time of the end, now this is the end time of the end, the king of the south shall attack him, and the king of the north shall come against him like a whirlwind, with chariots, horsemen, and with many ships, and he shall enter their countries, overwhelm them, and pass through them. Now the angel here describes the king of the south and the king of the north in final conflict. Now this is going to take place somewhere in the Middle East, and will employ virtually every type of warfare that the angel could have described at that time of Daniel. Now these were the words that he used there. Now were he talking today, and he would tell us that this war is coming between the king of the north and the king of the south, and it's going to have more than ships and chariots and all of the things that he's going to come in. It says in 40 that he's going to attack them, and the king of the north shall come against him like a whirlwind, with chariots, horsemen, and many ships. Well, this also today they would say they would come against them with atomic bombs and rockets and all kinds of aircraft and just all the things of war that we have today. And it's going to take place somewhere down in the Middle East. Egypt and Russia seem like the best choices of these two armies, the king of the north and the king of the south. However, that's the proponent. That's equal. Ezekiel 38 and 39 has this viewpoint that it'll be Russia and Egypt. However, if the angels tend to stay away from his imagery in the beginning of the Antichrist, he may find himself battling Egypt and Syria. Could be either one there. We can't be sure, but we know there's going to be a huge war. It's going to have every kind of weapon you can imagine involved in it. Verse 41 says, he shall also enter the glorious land, going back to Israel, and many countries shall be overthrown, but these shall escape from the hand: Edom, Moab, and the prominent people of Ammon. Now it's useless to speculate why Edom, Moab, and Ammon are spared. The angel predicted it because that's precisely what's going to happen in God's plan. That's the reason for it. Verse 42 says, he shall stretch out his hand against the countries, and the land of Egypt shall not escape. He shall have power over the treasures of gold and silver, and over all the precious things of Egypt. Also the Libyans and the Ethiopians shall follow at his heels. But news from the east and the north shall trouble him. Therefore he shall go out with great fury to destroy and annihilate many, and he shall plant the tents of his palace between the seas and the glorious holy mountains, yet he shall come to his end, and no one will help him. Okay, now North Africa. In North Africa, the Antichrist receives word from the Middle East and causes him to rush back in great rage. Remember, this, of course, is the end time. This is taking place during the end of the tribulation. You and I will not be there to see it, thank God. So he's going to rush back in great rage from there. And he believes that he describes, many believe that this describes his advance to the Battle of Armageddon. Since he pitched his royal tents between the seas at this beautiful holy mountain, that would be Megiddo, which is mentioned 12 times in the Old Testament. And it lies right today. It's on a major highway connecting Egypt and Syria, right there. And no one can say with certainty what Daniel 11:45 and Revelation 16:16 indicates. The exact geographical site, we can't say it for sure. No one's been able to. But we know it's going to be the site of the final battle between good and evil. And no interpretation makes any better sense than Megiddo. And Daniel's angels seem to say that the great world leader finds his final defeat right there. And yet it says, yet he will come to his end, and no one will help him. Thank God he's gone. In Daniel chapter 12, 12:1, at that time, Michael shall stand up. Michael the archangel shall stand up, the great prince who stands watch over the sons of your people, and there shall be a little time of trouble, such as never has sinned. There shall be a time of trouble, not little, but there shall be a time of trouble, such as never was since there was a nation, even to that time. And at that time your people shall be delivered, every one who is found written in the book. Okay, we've already met Michael the great prince, the angel. Now we have a solid confirmation of the suggestion that was made earlier that Michael serves as a guardian over the angels of Israel. Now Daniel learned that the future time held a time of distress, such as not seen or not happened from the beginning of time. This is where all these nuclear things come in. But it's going to be harm among Daniel's people. And there's going to be those whose names are found written in the book, and they'll be delivered. This is likely the book of life the Bible first mentions in Exodus 32 and 33. Various times, right up to the end of the Bible in Revelation 20:12, it's mentioned. Now, the time of deliverance here, there's got to be a great resurrection. At the time of deliverance, there's going to be a great resurrection. Multitudes who sleep in the dust, it says, will rise. I haven't read that yet, have I? Let me get back to that, verse 2. Many of those who sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake, some to everlasting life, some to shame and everlasting contempt. Those who are wise shall shine like the brightest of the filament, and those who turn many to righteousness like the stars forever and ever. So those that are in the book, and those that stood till the end, they're going to shine bright like the brightness of the firmament. And those who brought others to know Christ are going to shine, be like the stars forever and ever. At the time of his deliverance, there will be a great resurrection of the multitudes who sleep in the dust of the earth. Now the participants here are headed towards everlasting life and everlasting contempt. Those who sleep in the dust are going to come up and they're going to stand judgment. If they don't know Christ, they're going to go to hell. Or if they aren't Christians, or if they weren't believers, they're going to go to hell. If they are believers, they're going to go to everlasting life. Now, this resurrection is commonly called the first resurrection. Revelation 25 and 6 mentions it. It's the first resurrection. We're going to have two. That's the first one. because it takes place during the millennial kingdom. Okay. Now the other will take place. This was at the end of the millennial kingdom. Now when will this event's going to occur? Clearly at the end of the tribulation, when the Jews are delivered from their curse, are united with the Old Testament saints that are raised up from the dead. Having assumed the dual resurrection, the angel next he changed his focus, and now he's focusing only on the righteous, those who were wise enough to hold on to the truth and the most difficult surroundings, and they will shine like the brightness of heaven. And the ones who bring others to righteousness are going to be like the stars, and they shine forever and ever. Verse 4, but you, Daniel, shut up the words and seal the book until the time of the end. Many shall run to and fro, and knowledge shall increase. Now the Old Testament talks a lot about sealing books, keeping them for secret, and emphasizing their authority and authenticity as well as for preservation of their integrity. Now we have the book of Daniel in our hands because God has preserved it until the end times in which we live. So we have it, we're studying it, and I'm glad we did, because this is the book that God wanted us to know this. Verse 5, it says, then I, Daniel, Daniel's talking again, looked, and there stood two others, one on this riverbank and one on the other that riverbank. And the one said to the man clothed in linen, who was above the waters of the river, who walks on water and wears the white linen? How long shall the fulfillment of these wonders be? Then I heard the man clothed in linen, who was above the waters of the river, when he held up his right hand and his left hand to heaven, and swore by him who lives forever. He raised up both hands, worshiping and swearing by God, that it shall be for a time, a times, and a half time. And when the power of the holy people has been completely shattered, all these things shall be finished. So a time, and a half time, 3.5 years is how long it's going to last. When the power of the holy people has been finally broken, all these things will be completed. And this refers again to the impact of the tribulation and the sufferings that Israel is going to take on during the 3.5 years. The resurrection and the restoration will occur, and God will wind up human history at that time. Verse 8. Although I heard, I did not understand. Then I said, my Lord, what shall be the end of these things? And he said, go your way, Daniel, for the words are closed up and sealed till the time of the end. So Daniel found himself still confused and wondering how this was going to turn out. And all who find difficulty in interpreting this prophecy should be encouraged, because not only are we having trouble with understanding it, but Daniel said he didn't understand either. He says, I heard, but I didn't understand. Now, people who are really in need this message, verse 9, and he said, go your way, Daniel, for the words are closed up and sealed until the time of the end. Okay. People who really need this message in the future time of trouble will have access to it. And Daniel should rest assured in the assurance of that prophecy, of this prophecy. Verse 10, many shall be purified, made white and refined, but the wicked shall do wickedly, and none of the wicked shall understand, but the wise shall understand. So during the intervening period of time, The people of God will be refined in their faith and purified in their motivation, and through all these testings that they're going to have to endure. The higher quality of faith and life is viewed as a result of indwelling of the believer's heart by the Holy Spirit in the New Testament age, granting to the believer all the resources of Christ in the battle against evil. Moreover, the unbelieving world will not improve as a result of the testimony of the faithful, but will increase in its wickedness. Verse 11, and from the time that the daily sacrifice is taken away, and the abomination of desolation is set up, there shall be 1,290 days. 1,290 days. So, blessed is he who waits and comes to the 1,335 days. Now, the higher quality of faith and life is viewed here. Now, these verses seem intended to furnish believers with a prophetic yardstick, so that you can measure when it's going to happen. The measure of the second and more intense phase of the Great Tribulation, which is the end time. The last 3.5 months. Now, these beleaguered saints enduring the horrors of this catastrophic plagues and the massacres of the end time, the precise knowledge of the exact day of deliverance would be a great assurance. However, Matthew 24:22, Jesus said, "Unless those days are shortened, no flesh shall be saved. But for the elect's sake," those are the ones that are enduring it, "those days will be shortened." So here's an interval of 45 days or a month and a half. What is designated to take place in this short period can only be conjectured. Quite possibly, it may be a time when the 1,000-year earth rule of Christ is officially inaugurated. Because see, we're short. We don't understand what's going to happen. Why the prophecy left out that last 45 days. If Christ is going to be officially inaugurated, maybe that'll be the time for that. And he's going to be judging people. There's going to have a judgment time. So maybe that was the time was taken for it. We don't know. But this is where Christ is going to be inaugurated as King of Kings and Lord of Lords, finally. And he's going to take his seat on David's throne, which has been prophesied for all those years. Verse 13, the final verse of this chapter, says, "But you go your way till the end, for you shall rest, and will arise into your inheritance at the end of the days." The angel repeated his command to the prophet to go your way. Go your way, Daniel. But this time the word seems to be more permanent. Daniel will rest, and then at the end of his days, he'll be resurrected to receive his allotted inheritance, just like we will. Praise God for his word. Praise God for his word. Well, there you have it. I don't know whether I've done much of a good job on it or not, but I have learned so much from this book of Daniel. And I guess I'm ready to find another one. I need your input as to what you'd like for me to teach. I mean, I can start at Genesis and go through Revelation, but I don't want to do that. I want to go where your heart is, where your needs are. I don't know about you. Apparently, some people, I got a couple of people that wanted Daniel, and nobody else wanted anything accordingly. They didn't notify me of it. So here was Daniel. So apparently, I know I needed it. It was good for me. So apparently, it was good for some other people. So let me have your input, please. Help me on this, will you? Yeah, it's hard to stand here and just sit up here and just talk into a microphone and look at myself on a computer. I'm not knowing whether there's even anybody out there listening or not. So let me know, would you? I appreciate it. God bless you. Have a wonderful, wonderful time. I started to say week. Well, you can have a wonderful week, but it might be a little more than a week before we get back together. But let me hear from you. And just remember, I love you so very, very much.